Vehicle owners have a lot of options as to what they can do to customize the vehicles to their tastes while also improving the performance of these vehicles. I think behind tinting windows, getting different wheels, changing the exhaust systems or making them louder, the next biggest thing people usually consider are brake system upgrades. In fact, I'd like to argue that this is one of the most effective things that you can actually do for your vehicle. So there are options to this as to how you go about it, and I wanted to talk about this in some detail. Brake system upgrades come in many flavors. You can get different pads, stainless steel braided lines, different rotors, different calipers. Most of these are kind of non-visual, you just know it performs better. But with rotors, you could get drilled rotors, slotted rotors, drilled and slotted rotors, sprinkle slotted rotors, or you could be comfortable with just blank rotors. There is more to brake system upgrades than just what it looks like. And in this video, it will be Nissan and Infiniti specific. I'd like to reintroduce the topic and kind of go into a little more detail. All right, so just a recap on what we're talking about here. The big brake upgrade in Nissan and Infiniti circles. This is known as a Akebono BBK, and BBK in this case is Big Brake Kit. Akebono is a manufacturer that makes the calipers that we usually see for our sport models. So for that reason, you might also see it referred to as the Sport Brake Upgrade. And that is referring to that we're getting these upgrades from sport models of Infiniti and Nissan vehicles. So this video is a follow-up as to the upsides and downsides of doing the Akebono upgrade. First reason you'd want to do it, most people do it, is cosmetic reasons. Second thing is for performance. That makes sense. Third reason could be for maintenance reasons. I don't think this one gets enough attention, but I think more people should really consider it for maintenance reasons. On the other hand, we'll be objective and we'll also talk about the reasons why maybe this would not be a good upgrade for somebody. So on the downsides, one, cost. It could be a little cost prohibitive. And the next reason would be that installation issues. It's actually not too difficult. It's just that it's not a straightforward swap, and more people need to be aware of that. The third reason would be, surprisingly, performance. So in this video, I'd like to go into a little more detail as to these things. These are not new. We talked about this in a different video. So let's go ahead and title them. These are the advantages of doing, or the reasons to do it. And on the left side, disadvantages, the reasons not to do the upgrade. Okay. So let's just draw a dotted line over here because this is a semi-permeable wall that people can actually, some of these factors can actually cross back and forth, and you'll be able to see those as we talk about them down the line. Okay, so going to the first reason people do the upgrade, cosmetic. This one is kind of straightforward. Like many things in human life or human factors, size matters, and usually the upgrade, at least as we use it, is that we get larger rotors, larger calipers. They stand out a little more, and you can see them right there. They stick out a little more. They have writing on them. And I don't know, it just is what it is. Many people think that looks good, and I think most of us do too. Not only the rotors, by the way, the calipers themselves, they have a lot more metal on them, a little more exposed metal, and as a result of that, I usually feel like you can do more with the calipers. So you will see the calipers usually, I mean, you could paint and you can do things to your base model calipers, but then more likely you usually see the sport model calipers having more work done to them. You could leave them silver like they come. You could paint them. You see them. They take very well to paint, to powder coat. You could put some stickers on them. You could put Nissan stickers. You could put Infiniti stickers if you wanted to. You could put Akebono stickers if you wanted to as well. And I think some people, you could even put your name if you wished to. So a lot of options with regards to this system. Second thing will be performance. We do this because, and the thing that enables us to claim performance out of this is larger diameters. The rotors, if we compare the size of the rotors from the base model systems and the other systems, you'll see that the diameters are a little larger. Larger diameters, simplified, enables you to get more braking force, for the same foot push, so to say, push of the pedal. So, and it's going to be I don't want it to be too scientific, but I want to cover it in a little more detail. So, for example, if a vehicle is moving forward, it's basically this is where most braking will be when you're moving forward, right? So, assuming that rotor, the brake force doesn't change at all, and we're going to label it here, but you're going to get larger rotors. What happens with the BBK rotors is that you end up having a larger radius, and a larger radius results in just multiplying braking force by the radius arm. You end up getting a larger moment, and that braking moment is what ends up opposing your normal motion. So, simplified, let's just go with braking forces go up. And another thing with larger, these are not only larger rotors, but they have more mass. It's metal, so whenever you go up in diameter, as long as everything is uniform, you have more mass. More mass is better because now your rotor is a better heat sink. It's gonna be, and not only that, the pads are usually a little larger, so not as large as the rotors, but generally when you combine those things, you have better heat tolerance with your braking system. All right, so helps you with things like brake fade and just making sure your brakes are always working whenever you need them. So as you can see, bigger is better, and not only the front rotors are larger, the rear rotors are also larger as well. So the benefits of a better braking system goes back both to the front and to the back, and that's usually one of those reasons whenever you do the upgrade, make sure you change the entire setup, right? I suppose we could say in conclusion that larger rotors, better braking. That's how our performance angle comes about. Obviously, assuming everything else is equal. Okay, let's talk about maintenance now. This is the one thing I think should get more recognition for its effects. So first, comparing the Akebono, the upgraded brake system compared to the base model systems. Yes, the sport brakes look more complicated, larger and whatnot, but I find them easier to deal with. One, it's easier to look and check your pad wear. It's easier to replace the pads, just push some pins out and get it out. There are no slide pins to be lubed up or anything. It's really simple. You can do it with most basic tools. I think that's really good about it. And then the next thing with maintenance, maybe we should call this more reliability than anything, is that I don't know what it is with Nissan brakes, and this is something that has been occurring ever since I had my first Nissan, a '97 Nissan Maximo. The rear calipers always seem to seize. You know, I really can't explain it, but it seems like it always happens with rear calipers. So I think it would be a nice upgrade in this case if you got rid of the rear caliper design, and if you are doing this upgrade not for performance, not for looks, but just because you want a more reliable system whereby your slide pins are not going to get frozen and your caliper stops working or ends up like grinding your rotors all the and messing them up, this would be a valid reason to upgrade to the sport brakes. They just seem to last a little longer. I do have another benefit now that I'm looking at this, and I don't know if you guys are ready to hear this, but so because of the design, the sport brakes actually exert less force on the brake pads. But we can talk about that later. Talking about brake pads, they will last longer due to one or two reasons. The force thing I was talking about, then they're the effect of heat isn't as bad on the pads, and two, they're being squeezed evenly from both sides, so they last longer and they wear evenly. And I think that's a pretty good thing for your maintenance cost over the long run. Let's label these 1, 2, 3. Let's number them. So moving ahead on to the reasons not to do or reasons why this wouldn't be a good idea, I think for one, generally the base model brakes just work. But I mean, we've already decided, or rather we're considering, so I don't think this is a really fair assumption, so we're going to just mark that as a 0. Let's go to cost and explain why this might be a downside. When it comes to cost, there are many different ways to look at this. One, you could either be replacing your worn brakes, or you could be doing it as an upgrade. I'm looking at it as an upgrade in that you already have working brakes, but you decide to get other brakes. So that's already a cost over there. And what I'm going to do is that I prefer to buy just for the sake of this video. I know you can source these things cheap somewhere else, but let's go to the Concept Z Performance website as an example, because I want to buy the full BBK kit from them without having to hunt for any other parts from any other sources. So just pricing things around the most basic BBK upgrade. No other upgrades were offered to the system. And by the way, that's a slippery slope. Things can actually climb up pretty high. So assuming that you would buy just the way I did, not having to bargain hunt or anything, the average cost would be something in the neighborhood of 1,144, and that's before shipping and handling. And as I said, I played with the Concept Z website, and if you don't watch out, you could, the upgrades are kind of a slippery slope. You'd go over $3,000 if you are not careful. So again, just saying, the entry price for this experience is going to be $1,144. Okay, and now let's talk about the installation part. This part kind of ties in with the first part. It kind of is, there's a cost to it. You know, you're gonna spend money to do it quickly, or you're gonna spend a lot of time trying to do it cheaply. So at the end of the day, installation isn't too complicated for most people who are going to be working on the vehicle, but there's some things that you need to watch out for, and you need to have a decent selection of tools because you might need to modify things more or less permanently. On the most basic level, assuming you got the kit for free, you got some pads for free, you need a way to adapt the brake lines to your new calipers. So the cheapest entry level price is going to be getting a banjo bolt that's, you know, the right length, because otherwise if you try to bolt it down, you'll realize that your stuff is leaking. The second thing is that, do you see this brake right here? This is the big brake kit, and I've got a dust shield over here, so I can't trace my original one, but when you look at this one here, you'll notice that it's got this feature over here. There's a lip over here. So that exists on both the base model brakes and the rear brakes, and you need to find, because the rotors are larger, you need to find a way to address that dust shield. I replaced it, but I think a lot of people usually just end up cutting it. So either way, so get a nice metal cutter to get ready to do that. So surprisingly, the front doesn't have that problem, at least not in the M45, not the 2006 through 2010 models, because look at the original dust shield. This is the one that came with the base model brakes, and it's like it's barely there, you know. So I like to do that's just the style, my way of life, I suppose. I would rather not cut it. I removed the bearing and I replaced this thing. It was a lot of effort, but my thinking was that if Infiniti did not need to give you any dust shield, they were not going to give you anything at all, right? So when it comes to installation, there is another point of view here. One is there's an issue of brake clearance. So the brake calipers are larger in the Akebono system. As you can see, the front calipers are larger. The rear slightly larger, but it doesn't seem to be that much of an effect. So the reason this is important is that, first, you get larger rotors and calipers. So I think the minimum size diameter of a wheel you need to be able to put on there is 18 inches. So that's just the first thing. But then once you get your wheel on there, and when you bolt it down, if you can even bolt it down, you realize that the wheel will not move because the spokes are hitting the caliper. And as you can see, you'll see some friction marks and things like that. And I think this is, I've heard of some people taking care of this problem by cutting, basically get an angle grinder or something like that and shave things off. You could shave off material from the caliper, or, basically hack away and, test fitting until you feel that the wheel can go through. As much as I don't like doing that, I would rather do it, I guess, on the caliper than do it on the wheel, because you might end up causing some irreversible damage. So I think most people will go for option B, something a little less drastic. This is called a wheel spacer. And just like it sounds, a wheel spacer is used to give space to a wheel. So you mount it right before you mount the wheel. The different types of spacers, but mount the hub just for demonstration, and then get the wheel and mount it the way we were gonna, basically the way you would do it normally, and get it seated down, torque everything down to spec. And then at this point, when you go ahead and test the wheel, you'll find that it clears, right? That's pretty nice. I mean, the minimum required for Infiniti N35s is 15 millimeters, and that just barely clears. But hey, clears is clears, as you can see. So the thing about spacers is that some people love and swear by them, while some people strongly dislike them. I'm on the camp of people that prefer not to use them if I can at all help it. So what we do is you get different wheels that are made for big brake systems. And I guess for me, it's just I'd do anything to just get rid of spacers, to not have to use spacers. I'd rather not do it personally. So get those off. And then, as I said, you can get something aftermarket, but there are Nissans and Infinitis that already come with wheels that can tolerate big brake systems. So though I'm an OEM plus person, so that's what I usually go for, and that's what I did for this M45. And there are many other Infinitis and Nissans that you do. And what happens generally, you get those wheels, no spacers required, and the spoke designs and the offsets. I think with these wheels, it's actually more the spoke design more than anything, that they do not hit the calipers at all. Not surprisingly, this is not a problem in the back. In the back, the caliper is much smaller, so whenever you use your original wheel, you get lots of clearance, and your wheel turns just fine. But we're going to match our wheels. We don't want to have different matched wheels front and back. It's not like it really matters too much, but remember the number one reason people do this upgrade? Yeah, cosmetics. All right, let me tie these two factors together, cost and installation. They're kind of one and the same, depending on what decision you make, okay? So the cost of entry, the most basic part, if you, again, buy something with a warranty, is $1,100. Depending on what decisions you make at that point, your costs could climb. At the point of purchase, if you decide to upgrade your rotors, cost goes up. If you decide to paint your calipers, cost goes up. If you decide to get different pads, you guessed it. If you decide to get stainless steel braided lines, something else happens. And that's that. That's before it even gets to your garage. And then at the garage, what other decisions did you have to make? Did you have to get wheel spacers? Okay, that's a little more nominal cost to it. Did you decide to get new wheels? And when you got new wheels, did you need to get new tires? So the cost, if you're not careful, like the cost could be pretty exponential. Well, obviously, as I said, this only applies if you end up buying these things from a store. If you're getting everything that you have for free, well, then it doesn't matter. None of this applies to you. Okay, I think that's good enough. Anyway, let's talk about performance. All right, so now the third point that would dissuade me from doing this upgrade, or basically number 3 reason I regret doing the upgrade, it's performance. So up until this point, size has been an advantage to us. Diameter has been something that we enjoyed with regards to performance, right? Thing is, when it comes to size, when it comes to metal, as I said, if everything else is uniform, when it goes larger, that means it gets heavier. There's more mass, more weight to these rotors. And so it's simple, really. You got a larger disc and it's got more mass, and it's supposed to be rotating to enable your vehicle to perform well. Yeah, it didn't really take long for me to feel the reduction in performance. My acceleration sucked. As soon as I got the modification, as soon as I installed the new brake system, I could feel my acceleration slow down significantly. Well, granted, I did get larger wheels as well, but it's just something that I figured needs to be covered as well. The next performance aspect that suffers is fuel economy, because now you have like a constant passenger. You're carrying extra weight in your vehicle every single day, all the time. For me, that was too 2 miles per gallon, tested and tracked over 2 years, and just same commute and everything was the same. Granted, again, larger wheels, but I feel like taking the effect of the wheels off, I would say maybe just 1 mile per gallon over the same commute if nothing else changes for you. And I think sometimes we fall into this mindset that people start saying, well, you shouldn't be considering fuel economy, we car people don't really care about fuel economy. That really, it in all simple terms, it is a performance metric that people do look at. If I have two vehicles that both of them give me 500 horsepower and so much torque, I will probably buy the one that gets better fuel economy. The third thing is going to be handling. Now, again, you have a heavier disc, and while steering and things like that, there's going to be a little more effort. This one, just like fuel economy, needs to be tracked over a long time, or maybe needs really organic ways of testing. It does happen mathematically, scientifically, it does happen, but not everybody's going to be able to feel that. But I can say things that can make the handling worse, sometimes things like spacers that can throw things off. Okay, that pretty much brings us to the end of the advantages and disadvantages in a little more detail. So, what's the verdict? Well, I was going to do a verdict, but then I realized that maybe this needs a whole page discussion, so we'll do it as a bonus. Okay, so here's the verdict. But first off, I guess I should introduce myself and characterize as what kind of a driver I am. I drive my vehicle to work, go back home. My vehicle has never seen a racetrack. I stop at the light, speed up, so there's a lot of acceleration to like 40, 50 miles an hour. I never turn at speed. I just slow down and take a corner like most people do. So I guess I am your average user. With that in mind, let's talk about what my experience has been with this BBK upgrade over the past 3 or 4 years. For me, I think the cons outweigh the pros for it. I've felt the downsides more than I've gained from the upsides. For one, let's talk about the negatives. My fuel economy tanked. Well, it just dipped a little bit, 2 miles a gallon. As I said, I know a lot of that was from a good chunk of it, maybe half the blame should go to my wheels, and but I already know, again, basically, so the upgrade is what was the domino that started all this. Okay, the next thing is my handling, and can be a little difficult to quantify that, but it is what it is. The third thing is my acceleration sucked, but again, I'm not racing for anything, not winning any prizes for accelerating harder, but I noticed that it did tank, makes driving less enjoyable. I do like to kind of go back and, I guess, put an asterisk whenever it comes to handling, because, as I said, at the end of the day, if you drive like typical people drive, in that you're just going, in the US especially, you're just driving straight for most part, does the handling really matter? That being said, there is a group of people to whom the Akebono upgrade is going to be more of a positive than a negative. I think these are people who run their vehicles in conditions for which brake fade might be more of a concern. The first group I can think of is people who tow a lot and maybe haul a lot of stuff in their vehicles. And, you just, braking is so important. So people who tow their stuff downhill, this is an upgrade for you. The second group of people, I think, would be, again, autocross would really benefit from that, the brake fade stuff and the increased braking. But I'd like to give a little pushback here. If you autocross seriously, they're probably better brake system for you to get than the stock system over here. Just an opinion. Now, I bet there are people, there's some healthy cynicism, probably it should be, saying, well, no, for me it was all positives, or for me it was all negative. I never really felt any positive or any negative out of the upgrade when I did it, or maybe they never really did it, just kind of theorizing on what it could be. I wouldn't fight it, I wouldn't argue, but I just say, do you feel like your test has integrity? I'm not saying that you're personally not honest, I'm just saying the comparison you're making, is it fair? So for one, a lot of people, whenever they do these upgrades and they say, man, it feels like a new car, because they got new brakes to replace old brakes. Yes, there are some people out there that maybe have compared new Akebono systems against new base model systems. I'm one of those people. the the difference was not that dramatic in between the two cars. I've also done extremes. I've done, worn brakes and worn brakes, and they feel kind of the same. I've done new Akebono brakes versus old brakes, which is like most people do. Obviously, the new brakes outshine them. I've done old Akebono brakes versus new base model brakes, and the base model brakes obviously performed better than the Akebono brakes. So this is just something that I think some people should kind of, no matter what camp you're on, whether you think they're absolutely useless or whether you think the upgrade is absolutely useful and everybody should do it, I just think that you should examine your stuff and make sure you're comparing apples to apples. And now the next thing I'd like to mention with regards to making your judgment is that for a lot of people, you whenever they do the upgrade, they change a lot of things at the same time. So for example, let me use me as an example. So right now I made changes to, I got the brake calipers, I got the rotors, I got different pads, I got different wheels as well. So I increased my weight. So when I talk about fuel economy, I mean, I did a lot of different things that will be detrimental to my fuel economy. Some people also do a lot of different positive things. They get larger brakes, and it's kind of really hard to justify how you don't get a weight penalty there. But, just thinking about people who get new brakes, you got new calipers at the same time. You got, you flush your brake system because your brake system had not been flushed. You change the brake lines. Usually people jump for the stainless steel braided lines, but that's a different topic. But again, you're replacing old lines with new lines, so you end up making so many changes, and to you it's all positive. But when you change 7 different parameters, can you admit that, yep, this one thing is the one that made things go better? And as I said, also for people who would be on the camp that says absolutely it's useless, I think there's got to be a balance somewhere. There's a balance where you look at it and say, I've weighed the advantages and the disadvantages. And I think for me, because I live in Utah and I have an Infiniti crossover SUV that I go downhill towing a trailer all the time, for me, I definitely want to do this upgrade because I need braking. Someone else can look at it and say, I don't care about looks. I don't care. It seems I'm just always on the highway. I never slam on my brakes and things like that. So maybe the Akebono brake is not for me. Whatever camp you lie on, I hope this presentation has been somewhat useful, and it enables you, gives you tools, or talks about things in ways that you haven't seen before. Kind of lay them all together for you to make your own judgment. What's the verdict? Still open.